Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, because of a particular question, I'm going to be focusing on two of the actresses who were in The Homecoming, Josephine Hutchinson and Dorothy Stickney. This is based on a question from Holly, who said, "Can you tell us a little about the original Baldwin sisters, the actresses in The Homecoming? I liked all four actresses. They sure knew how to make the most of a scene." They certainly did. So in this case, I'm just going to focus on Miss Mamie and Miss Emily as we first met them in The Homecoming. Dorothy Stickney was born in 1896 in Dickinson, North Dakota, and she passed away in 1998 at the age of 102. Like many actors, she started off doing theater. In New York, she was in the long-running Broadway hit Life with Father. She also, later on in her stage career, replaced Irene Ryan, who died during the run of Pippin on Broadway, and she took over that role as a replacement. Now, also, this was between 1972 and 1977. I'm not sure exactly when she took over the role, but also as a Broadway replacement was actor Michael Rupert, who was on the Waltons in the episode The Boy from the CCC. And he played the young man, Gino, who came and stayed with the Waltons briefly, and who John threatened with a shotgun in the middle of the night when he caught him trying to steal money from the kitchen. Now, I think I spoke at one point about how some of us were in New York and we got to see Michael in that production of Pippin. So it's possible that we also saw Dorothy at that point, depending on whether she had already taken over the role or not. So once again, a small Waltons world. I also found that her father, Victor Hugo Stickney, was a doctor who made house calls on horseback, and he was among the first 10 elected to the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. So I would have had a lot in common with him as Mary Ellen, who also made all of her nursing rounds on horseback. So just a fun piece of trivia. In 1979, Dorothy published Openings and Closings, a memoir that chronicled her long career as well as her secret battle with stage fright. She also wrote poetry. And because of a medical condition, she was unable to go into bright places and spent most of her childhood indoors to protect her very sensitive eyes. Now, I did note that her eyes were quite a feature on screen, that they were very prominent and very noteworthy. I mean, they always caught my attention because they seemed so bright and alert. So perhaps that was a result of having to deal with bright lights and adjusting to it. Who knows? But I thought it was one of her best features. Another interesting fact I came across was that a museum has been created in her honor at the house her husband, Howard Lindsay, bought for her. And this museum is in Stanton, New Jersey, and it was her private retreat from Broadway and Hollywood. On television, she was in the TV production of Arsenic and Old Lace. She played the Queen in the 1957 live TV production of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella with Julie Andrews. And there's a photo I came across where it doesn't specifically name her, but you see up on that balcony there the king and queen overlooking Cinderella and her prince at the ball. And that is indeed Dorothy Stickney. She also appeared in ABC's Stage 67 anthology series production of Evening Primrose, the Stephen Sondheim musical where she played Mrs. Monday. On the movie screen, she was in And So They Were Married, The Uninvited, I Never Sang for My Father, and The Little Minister with Katharine Hepburn, amongst other things. Josephine Hutchinson played Miss Mamie Baldwin. Josephine was born in 1903 in Seattle, Washington, and died in 1998. She also started in theater in New York and made her Broadway debut in The Birdcage in 1925. She did productions of The Cherry Orchard, Hedda Gabler, Camille, The Seagull, and Peter Pan, amongst others. And then she was put under contract with Warner Brothers Studios in 1934. She was in the films North by Northwest, The Son of Frankenstein as Elsa von Frankenstein with Basil Rathbone, Boris Karloff, and Bela Lugosi. She was in The Story of Louis Pasteur with Paul Muni. She was in Love is Better Than Ever with Elizabeth Taylor. Josephine's television productions and credits included Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, 4 appearances on Perry Mason, Little House on the Prairie, The Partridge Family, Bonanza. So she had quite an extensive career in both film and television, and it lasted for many, many years. I found it in looking back at various different photos of these two actresses that they both were quite the stunning beauties as young women, and it's very evident why Hollywood came calling. They had a real presence and a real natural beauty. And I feel like both of them, as they matured, just matured into another form of beauty. I felt that even in The Homecoming as Miss Mamie and Miss Emily, they had such grace and presence and beauty in those roles. They were very captivating on screen. I loved my time working with both of them, although I really didn't particularly get to do scenes with them because all of their scenes were really with John Boy and Cleavon Little as Hawthorne Dooley. But fortunately, those sets were on the same soundstage at CBS Studios where we filmed the interior of the Walton house, the living room and kitchen area. So I got to see those sets, and I have mentioned that the set of their parlor where they filmed the scenes when Hawthorne and John Boy come by to ask if they might be able to borrow some gas from their papa's car, that had the huge Christmas tree. I just loved that set. And I remember when those candles were all lit on that tree because they were going to be filming, and it was just stunning to see, and yet a little frightening because I thought, how are they going to keep those candles from setting fire to the tree? And we're on a soundstage, and I'm sure they had every precaution in place. And I imagine that they fireproofed the tree and anything they put on it, and that it was, sort of being very carefully monitored. But I just could not imagine people putting live candles on their Christmas tree and then lighting them in real life. And I kept thinking, how on earth did these two ladies light this tree? And then they'd leave the room. And how did they remember to make sure that they got them all shut off at night? I don't know. It was an interesting era in time. And within the Homecoming, they were certainly, and within the Waltons, they were a bit of a throwback to an earlier era. And there was an elegance to their life and to their characters that I think really added something to the show. I didn't really get a chance to know either of them particularly, but they were up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming during that week that we were filming. They were on the airplane. Everybody flew up together and in this chartered plane, and we were all staying at that same motor lodge, the Virginian. How appropriate in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that we stayed at the Virginian. And so I was able to get a couple of candid shots for my own photos, for my own keepsakes of both of them one day around the motel when we were outside and the weather was quite lovely and we were, building snowmen and things like that. So it was a real pleasure. They were charming ladies. They were very nice to us children and everybody else they had. They were personable, and Dorothy Stickney had this very sweet girlish giggle, much like I felt Ellen Corby did. There was a youthfulness about the way she portrayed Miss Emily's sort of innocence. And that was always really a prominent part to me of that character. And she really established that well in the Homecoming. And then, of course, as we moved into the series and Mary Jackson took that over, she equally embodied that aspect of the character of Miss Emily. And then Miss Mamie, of course, was the more grounded and a little more sensible of the two in the homecoming. And Josephine really brought that to the character. All four actresses brought their own stamp to those roles, and yet they were equally charming and delightful in both shows. I hope you have enjoyed this little look at Dorothy Stickney and Josephine Hutchinson, the two actresses that played the Baldwin sisters in The Homecoming. It was fun for me to go and do just a little bit of a dive into their lives and their careers. And there wasn't a lot of information readily available, but certainly it gave me the sense of the breadth of the careers that they had and how fortunate we were to have them with us in The Homecoming. Thank you for joining me for this segment. If you enjoyed this and other segments of mine, please do hit like and subscribe. I'll be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons, more questions and Ask Judy, and more special guests. Thanks for watching.